Yeah, hi everyone. I think we give it probably 30 more seconds to let people join, and then we get started. So maybe grab a glass of water or your preferred beverage, and then we get started in some seconds. All right, so I guess we can start right now. Today's topic for our webinar is how to manage external access across Microsoft 365. And yeah, we saw a lot of interest in that webinar. We had a lot of registrants, so that might be a very interesting topic, apparently. My name is Björn Erkens. I'm the product owner of Rancor Governance, and I will be your host today. Probably later on, our co-founder and CEO, Matthias Einig, will also join us to take your questions. With regards to questions, please make use of the Q&A functionality, and our team will then look through the Q&A, and then in the end, we will try to answer all of your questions. All right, let's get started. So the big question is, why should we allow external access in Microsoft 365? So the fact is, there's probably no way around it, right? Employees need to collaborate with externals, whether that are consultants, whether that are suppliers, or even customers. We need to have a way of how to work with externals for projects and so on. But apparently, even though we need to collaborate, there are still organizations out there which make use of option one, lockdown systems. So they maybe don't like to make it easy to work with externals. But what is the result of that? The result is what we call shadow IT. So end users share information then via email, maybe via USB key, via Dropbox. So they are using their own system, so to speak, because I mean they need to collaborate, and if the organization makes it hard for them, they will find a way of how to do that anyhow. Also, end users will be frustrated with inefficient IT, because why do we offer our end users all of these different Microsoft services if we then lock down certain functionality and not let them work productively with that? Also, for the IT admin team or the IT organization, they will face a lack of insight and control, because like when end users now use their own systems and make use of shadow IT, then the IT admins don't have any insight who shares what with whom, when, how, and how long. The second option here is obviously to allow and manage external access to Microsoft 365. And the tool that probably is taken the most time there is currently Teams. We saw a lot of Teams growth, especially now during the coronavirus times, where people obviously rushed to Teams and then also used it for external access and collaboration. The result of allowing and managing external access to Microsoft 365 is IT admins want to provide an efficient collaboration experience. Email is not built to do effective collaboration. Teams is. Also, obviously, like the point we had before, IT organizations want to reduce shadow IT. They want to gain insights and control of what is happening in their tenant. So in order to stay in control of your data, you want to allow and manage external access to Microsoft 365. What are some challenges? Challenges that we see oftentimes is, although IT is in control when managing external access, oftentimes they do not understand information lifecycle. What do we mean by that? We mean by that everyone agrees we need to have externals in our system for projects, but oftentimes then the IT doesn't really get alerts or know when projects end. And you probably don't want to give lifelong access to externals. You want to have a better understanding when you can get rid of externals again, right? Projects end and so on. Also, the insights are scattered in very many places, meaning the admin centers. If you're talking about Teams, if you're talking about SharePoint, Office 365 groups, and so on. And looking at these admin centers may provide you insights, but they are not actionable. You can't just press a button and do something with this information. You need to somehow build something or use something to actually deal with that data that you're looking at. That goes hand in hand with the third point, the lack of proper automated process to revoke external access. Now, if you see in the admin centers that people still have access, you can just revoke that access there. And the final point is that all of that is negatively influenced, so to speak, by the very high growth rate that we see of services used by your organization and by your end users, and it's very hard to keep track for IT there. So all of this essentially boils down to a risk, and this risk might be data loss. If external users still have access to data that they shouldn't have, that's a risk. All right, so again, like we always try to do for these webinars, is we did some polls on LinkedIn because we have a pretty big audience there. So we asked, how do you stay in control of external access to file sites, teams in Microsoft 365? So this is the result we get. So 41% said that they use PowerShell to write their own data automation or to get their own information. 27% use the out-of-the-box Microsoft 365 reports, 13% use third-party tools, and 19% still said we don't have a process. And there were some comments coming with that. My personal favorite is I embraced YOLO with my own tenants, and I learned afterwards that YOLO stands for you only live once. So that's right down my alley. And the three other people that commented here are mainly always saying the same thing. We are building something ourselves. So PowerShell, we are triggering some custom apps maybe. So we build stuff ourselves. All right, now let's go and explore these different options that people mentioned here. 90% say we don't not have a process. So we don't think that this is probably the best idea, but you know, you only live once, right? 41% said we use PowerShell or build a custom app or a Power App. So the downsides, obviously, with this approach is, first of all, it needs to be developed, right? So meaning you either need to have an in-house, you need to have in-house personnel that can develop that solution, or you make use of an external consultant that does this for you. And with both variations, you have probably the fear of brain drain. What happens when this person that built the solution leaves your organization? Are you able to keep this up? Also, what is happening here is it needs to maintain, right? You all know how Microsoft likes to change its APIs and functionality. So you really need to look that this self-developed solution works all the time. Also, the reports need to be generated and reviewed manually. Still, with that approach, in the first step, there's no automation that does something. Obviously, automations can be added, but that also needs to be custom developed. So kind of the same point like the first one. And also, when you develop such a solution, what we see oftentimes is that there is a limited end user interaction. Maybe you want to ask your end users because they know best. Do we can we get rid of these externals in that team? Do you, as a SharePoint site collection owner, still need these externals in your SharePoint site collection, right? So that must be worked into the solution, and that can become quite complex there. Then again, you might not only want to do external access for Teams, but also for SharePoint, Office 365 groups, and so on. So that solution needs to be created and updated for every service, right? So the more services you add, the more custom built solutions you need. And with that, you have the problems mentioned in the beginning. 27% said they use Microsoft 365 reports out of the box. And I mentioned this in the beginning briefly. You have your different admin centers. It is a manual discovery process, so you would need to go into these different admin centers probably on a daily basis, look at data, make sense out of that data, which is really time consuming and not easily repeatable, right? There is no automation there, so you can't press a button when you see something and get rid of external access, revoke access, and so on. So it's still a manual resolution, which is, yeah, like I said, time consuming, not easily repeatable. Also, what we found there when we talked to a lot of people is not all required data that you actually need to make sense out of that is easily accessible. So oftentimes the admin centers go some way, but maybe not. You maybe can't access all the data that you want to have there. And 13% said they want to use third-party tools, or they are actually using third-party tools. And so what we think a dream solution should be having is that it covers as many services as possible, right? So when we talked about this and the other examples there, we saw that you want to look at different Microsoft services for external access, right? So it might not make sense to use a solution that can only look at Teams external access. You also want to look at other services, even though maybe you currently only use Teams, maybe in the future you plan to roll out other services from Microsoft, because actually that's why you probably use Microsoft, because of its extensive capabilities for all the services it offers. So plan ahead and look at the solution there that covers a lot of these different Microsoft services. Also, what we think is part of a dream solution, it should let IT focus on implementing governance policies and not coding, right? So we think, and we heard, and we not only think, but we heard that from users, and when we did our research also, people don't want to code, people want to click stuff together so that everyone can do that. Again, this brain drain scenario, right? It helps a lot if it is easy to work with. Obviously, a solution needs to be customizable to your own organization's needs, although most of the times people have some general ideas about how to do things. Every organization differs a little bit, right? So you need to be able to work your thoughts into that solution. And a very important point is that a solution needs to provide insights and automate resolution. It doesn't help if you only have insights, but then you can't do anything about it, right? It doesn't help me if I look in my admin center and find out, hey, we have 500 guys which have external access, we need to revoke 200. We need to revoke access of 200 of them. We can't do it, right? So we want to have an automated resolution of the problems that I find with my insights. And also, you probably need to involve your end users in the resolution because they know best. The SharePoint site collection owner probably knows if external users in his SharePoint site collection still need to have access, or the same for the team's owner. He probably knows if external users in that particular team still need access or not. Also, a solution needs to scale with the business growth of your organization without requiring additional IT personnel, meaning you should be able to include more and more services that you use from Microsoft, but also you should be able, the system should be able to handle more data, and the system should be able to make your life easy and not having to get additional IT personnel when working with it. So that's why we built Rancor Governance. So let me introduce Rancor Governance real quick to you, and then I will go into a demo in which I show you how you can work with Rancor Governance to make your external access management way easier than it is today, hopefully. So Rancor Governance consists of ready-made policies, reports, and automation templates. So we always want to provide you with quick start templates ready to go, which you then can fully customize to your own liking without developer skills. So it's all drag and drop and click. You shouldn't need to write a single line of code to work with us. We strive to be the governance platform that lets you govern all the different Microsoft 365 services within one platform. We're not quite there yet, to be honest, but we are in a good way, but I will show you in a second. The platform is maintained and updated by us, so you don't need to worry about Microsoft's API changes breaking your scripts, and you can work with Rancor Governance as a software as a service solution, or if you are a little bit more restricted, then you can self-host in your own Azure subscription, as this is quite important for bigger enterprises and also for companies working in restricted or more industries that are a little bit more restricted. That's what I wanted to say. We, as I mentioned, we support quite a lot of services already. We are not there yet to govern all Microsoft 365 services, but we offer a lot. And on the roadmap, we have a lot more services that will come shortly. And we support a lot of different use cases, not only the external access use case, but that's what we want to talk about today. All right, with that said, let me fire up a quick demo of Rancor Governance, because you probably might want to look at what can we do here for you when it comes to external access. So now we are looking at Rancor Governance. As I mentioned, we currently can govern Power Automate, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Power Apps, Microsoft 365 groups, and Azure AD for you. More services are to come. High on top of the priority list is Next Exchange Online, for example, and then we will go along. The core bit of Rancor Governance is the checks and automations bit. Checks in our language are the policies or governance rules that you can define within Rancor Governance. So let's have a quick look here. We're looking here at the demo account, and here we see we have a lot of different checks, or as I said, policies configured for that particular tenant, and we see a lot of violation, or we see some violations to these checks. Before we have a closer look at this, let's have a look where these checks come from. If I click Add Check, this now brings us into our checks template library. Remember, I said in the beginning, we want to build out, we always strive to build out ready-to-use templates for you guys to give you guys a head start to governance, right? So here we have created different templates for different services, Microsoft 365 groups, Teams, Flow, also Power Automate, Power Apps, SharePoint rules, OneDrive rules, and they are steadily growing. We today wanted to look at a special use case, meaning external access. So let's have a look what we have for external access. For example, we can do a simple one, show a report or show or build a check for external users so that we always get an alert when we have new external users. We could build or you could make use of a policy that reports groups with external users also. And here, or groups with external owners, maybe another good example. And as we pick up the last sign-in date also, you could potentially extend this rule with a logic that says, hey, show me groups with external users that haven't logged in for the last 6 months rolling, because that might be a good signal to you that you're saying, we want to revise these external users. Do they still need access? Remember what I said in the beginning? Yes, we need external users for projects, but projects end. And today it's pretty hard to keep track on when projects end and when external users still need access to resources. So with that sign-in date, maybe we get a good indication. All right, let's have a review of these external users based on their sign-in activity, for example. Same with teams. Teams with external users could be built out the same way that I just described. We have, for example, here, when we are looking at SharePoint externally shared files, and there we could extend this rule also. Show me externally shared files which haven't been accessed for the last 6 months, 1 year, whatever rolling. So that might be another good indication there that you should review that. SharePoint site collections with external owners is maybe another example, and so on and so on. So how do these checks work here? So for example, let's take this this rule here, OneDrive files shared with external users. So you might want to enable this check or policy for your tenant, right? In that case, you would only click the template, and then this would open up our check builder for the user. And now this check is pre-populated because I come out of this template, right? So report a violation for every OneDrive that has any OneDrive file sharing with the filter is external user is true. And now you could either say, yes, this rule works for me, that's exactly what I'm after, or you can customize this rule to your needs. So we want to make customizable really easy for you. So you could work with filters. So you could add filters here on this primary object OneDrive in case you want to look at some other things here. You could add more conditions here by adding a condition which gives you more possibility. For example, you can add related objects here to the whole logic to kind of customize this template to your needs. Once you are happy with building out a check, in the next step, you would give the check or rule a title, a description, you would categorize it, give it a severity. So this rule is very important for me, high severity, so it will pop up on top of the list, or it's only informational, no worries, then it pops up at the bottom of the list. You don't need necessarily to stick to these templates, right? So these templates are only meant to give you guys a quick start, as I mentioned. But obviously you will have a lot of own ideas as well. And I think that's the power of what we have built here is you can also create your custom checks, which means when you click this, this will bring you into the empty check builder. And here you can now start building out your rule from scratch. So maybe you want to build a rule for teams, and then with your filters and related objects and so on, you build out the rule that you are after. Once you have defined a rule, either through the template or through the custom check functionality, we run a continuous scan over the connected tenant. And then whenever we find a violation to the checks that you have defined, we bring this back to you and let you work with that. How do we do that? So going back to this checks overview page, we now assume that you have created these different checks with the methods I just described, and then you will see probably a lot of violations to these checks, right? The bigger your organization, the more violations you will see here. And this is just normal, right? Because you use Microsoft 365 services to let your end users work productively. You don't want to lock down the system because then they get frustrated, shadow IT and everything that we mentioned. You want to let them productively work and they don't know better, right? So you will have a lot of violations here. So the question here is now, how do we get rid of these violations and how can we educate maybe the user in the same way? So for all of the checks that you have built and got into the system, you are able to add automations. So now let me just have a look if I find my my example that I talked about. So for example, we had this example of external users, OneDrive files shared with external users. So I mentioned that we have a way to automate resolving of these issues. So in that case, I would click a check, and through this add automation button, I can then build an automation that resolves the issue. So when we do this, this brings us to our automation builder. In this case, because I come out of this check, the first part, the trigger is already populated. So the trigger is on check violation. So if my check OneDrive files shared with external users finds OneDrive files that are shared with external users, then this triggers. What does it trigger? In step 2, we would now define an action of what we want to do here. For the action, how that works is you can click the add action button, and here you see a list of the actions we have currently available. This list will grow immensely over time now. You will be able to do all kind of different actions within Rancor Governance. A little bit backstory here. When we set out to build the tool, we first had the assumption people want to build everything themselves. So we thought people want to build their own flows to automate, and we just should trigger the flow so they can do everything freely on their side. Then we found out through a lot of calls, that's not the case. People don't want to build that stuff themselves because the mentioned things, brain drain, they need to maintain it, maybe they don't have in-house capability to do so, and so on and so on. So we learned they want to just click stuff together within Rancor Governance. So they can do that. In the future, you will be able, in the very near future, you will be able to, for example, kick out guests in Teams, kick out externals from SharePoint automatically as an action, and so on and so on. For now, you can do these couple of actions, and let me show you what you could do here for the OneDrive shared with externals action. So we actually, let me abort this here. We actually also go the same route with the automations like with the checks. Remember when I showed you the checks template library, we pre-built a lot of templates. So we are doing the same for automations. So currently we have 3 automation templates in here, and these will now grow as well. So for example, we have to remind OneDrive owners of externally shared files. All right, let's have a look at this. So if I click this template now, this now is an automation that triggers on schedule for each check violation of check OneDrive files shared with external users. I only want to remind people maybe every month, first Monday. I could do other stuff as well, obviously. And then this should be the trigger. And what is the action? We pre-filled the action already and there we just have an email in here currently. So for the OneDrive owner, the execute field is here to let you guys work with the different placeholders we have. So now an email gets sent to the OneDrive owner email address with the subject line, check OneDrive files shared with external users, and then an email body that explains something that they need to do. And the reasoning behind these automations templates is, again, to give you guys a quick start. So this here can now be customized, so you can write whatever you want to in here. And also, which is important for all automations that you build, you can define multiple steps, right? Because maybe for some automations, it doesn't do the trick if you only send one email. If people don't read emails, then that doesn't help. But you can add multiple steps here, saying maybe, yeah, we sent this email out as a first step, then maybe with a delay of 5 work days in that case, maybe we set up another action, right? And so with that, you could become more aggressive. So for example, if we think about in another case, hey, we find teams with external users, you send out an email to the team's owner, hey, do we still need, do these external users still need access to your team's team? No one reacts, then maybe in a second step, you automatically remove these users from teams in the future, right? So you could address all of these different cases with actions that you can really take care about, and you don't need to depend on people reacting to your questions or to your concerns. In the last step, obviously, you would give the automation a title, you would give it a description, you could categorize it, and then you get this automation live. You can always edit automations that you have built. You get an overview of all of them, how they're running, and so on and so on. All right, so that was the that is everything around checks. So the policies you build for external user access, maybe also obviously for other use cases, and then how you can deal with violations through automations. As I mentioned in the beginning, you can also work with that information manually. So if we're looking again at this OneDrive files shared with external users, and I click on that, I see here the OneDrive files shared with external users. So I get the information here that these OneDrive files are shared with the external user Tom Schmieger. I can also look at users in inventory, external users, and see from there what files are shared with them, for example. So that's how you can make sense out of that as well. Finally, in our dashboards, we want to provide you with a better way to do monitoring and reporting. We heard over and over again that IT admins are approached a lot of times by their different business units or by the security team, by management. Hey, can you provide me with report X around topics Y, right? And then the poor old admin needs to go into the admin center, tries to figure out the information needed, maybe he writes PowerShell scripts, and so on and so on. So we want to make this a little bit easier for you. So what we do here, we don't only provide this overview dashboard that should serve as kind of the cockpit for the user, but we also pre-build a lot of different use case dashboards that our users find valuable for you. Today we are talking about external access, but as I mentioned in the beginning, we cater to a lot of different use cases here. And when we click, for example, external access, we see here a couple of report tiles that we have pre-built in this overview, in this dashboard, for reporting purposes for external access. So for example, we would show here teams with external users or OneDrive files shared with external users, groups with external users, and so on and so on. And from there, when we find violations here, you can jump off to these into the checks, make sense out of this, then automate towards resolving of them, and so on and so on. All of the dashboards and the reports within these dashboards are only, again, a quick start for you. So you can always customize everything that we build. Also, obviously, these tiles, these report tiles. So tiles can be configured. They can be removed entirely from a dashboard. You can also add tiles to our pre-built templates. So maybe, hey, here externally shared files, if that wouldn't be on this dashboard, you could add this tile to a dashboard. So these are tiles that we have pre-built in this dashboard tile library. So you can work with them. You can customize them again to your needs. And you can also create custom tiles in which you can manipulate data yourself and work with different visualization styles. So again, the idea is to give you a tool to make your reporting here easier. Once you have a dashboard that you have built, so now let's move back to this external access dashboard in that case. Once you have built out a dashboard for reporting purposes, you can share this dashboard and all of the information always by clicking these three dots here on the respective dashboard. And this then opens up a side pane and lets you define if you want to send out this information only once, or if you want to send out this information on a recurring basis. So maybe you want to send out this external access overview on a weekly basis in this and this time, in this and this time zone to these recipients that you define. And then the recipients will get an email with a link. They need to authenticate. And then in their web browser, they only have access to that particular dashboard that you have shared. So they don't see inventory checks automation. They only see the dashboard shared with them. And the purpose again is to make your life easier in letting you automate also reporting around that. All right, let's move back to this here. So finally, let's jump into our Q&A section. Also, what I would love to mention is we are here to help. You can always grab a free full 30-day trial on our website through this link directly. You can go there and you find it on our website as well. So that is no hands holding if you don't want us to. You can just play around with the demo data that I just used for my demo as well. You get access to that. You don't need to give us any permissions. You can either, to make your life easier, sign in with your Microsoft account, or you can use email and password to sign into this demo environment and then just play around with it, show it to your colleagues, discuss. And then as a second step, if you then want to connect an own tenant, you are absolutely free to do so. Also, what I always love, as I'm the product owner, I like to do one-on-one walkthroughs, because all of you have different questions, all of you have different use cases, and I would love to take the time. If you want to do that, then absolutely feel free to schedule a one-on-one walkthrough with me so I can show you the tool, can answer your questions, and hopefully learn a little bit from you guys as well, because we are still learning a lot. We still want to make our product decisions based on feedback from people that use us. So feel free to do so. And with that said, Tias, Chrissy, Matt, let's come to the Q&A section. If you guys didn't put in any questions so far, feel free to shoot us the questions through the Q&A functionality so we can have a look and answer them now.
So, hello, this is Matthias. I have already answered most of the questions right now, but I will just recap them anyway, because we're recording this call, and for anyone who is not currently in the call and doesn't see the Q&A section, that would be kind of, he or she would be missing out on the question. So one of the first questions that we got is this service available in GCC tenants? So in governmental tenants, GCC high. So the SaaS version of the product is not available in GCC at the moment. We are investigating if we would offer that in the future. It of course requires additional hoops to go through, but what is possible is to run the entire product self-hosted in GCC. So you can run Rancor Governance as a in your own Azure environment within GCC. You install it yourself in your environment. You can lock down the entire Azure subscription so that it only accesses your GCC tenant, and you have full control over everything, and we don't have any access. So you control also, of course, updates of the product. Obviously, limitations of GCC still apply. So if APIs are not yet available in GCC that are needed to retrieve some of the data, then the data cannot be retrieved by Rancor Governance until Microsoft provides those APIs. Then there was another question about how the licensing for the product works for managed service providers who want to support multiple tenants. So in general, Rancor Governance is built in a way that you are managing access to the data in Rancor Governance independently of the access to the tenants. So we have the concept of workspaces. A workspace is basically a container that allows you to connect multiple environments, multiple tenants if you want. So an organization usually would have a workspace, and in there they would have at least one environment that connects a tenant. If they have more tenants, then they would have multiple environments. Each of those workspaces, you can manage permissions, also people that might not be part of the organization of the customer. So for example, you as an MSP, and you can of course have multiple workspaces and can access all of them, switch between them, and have control multiple customers' tenants through that. Again, also for MSPs, the self-hosting option is available. So if you do not want to use the SaaS option, so we host the entire environment, but rather want to host it yourself in your own Azure subscription, get credited of the Azure consumption towards Microsoft, which is important for many MSPs, for example, or might also make it easier for you to close the deals with your customers. This is also all possible with self-hosting. So please reach out to us to learn more about that.
I wanted to add here, so that's a very a good question, and I would really love to interact with the one that had this question, because we also want to figure out how we can make this a success for MSPs. So that would be helpful if you could reach out to us, or I reach out to you personally to have a conversation around that topic.
So I just got in a follow-up question on that. So or not necessarily follow-up on the MSP topic, but follow-up on the self-hosted questions. So the question was, if you install the product in your own tenant, what is the schedule for getting updates and bug fixes? How easy is the process to apply those updates? So obviously you will always be a little behind of the SaaS product. So every bug fix and every change that we do, every new feature that we add, will always go first into the SaaS tenant, because there we have full control also to monitor how things are performing and so on. So usually there is a delay of at least 2 to 4 weeks until a feature comes to self-hosted, and then of course it depends on you when you apply that update, because you are in control of updating. How is the process itself? So you get an updated installation package, and you just run eventually PowerShell scripts which update the existing binaries in your environment and do the necessary adjustments if required. Part of the self-hosting is, of course, that we are supporting you in that process, but eventually we don't have access to it. So troubleshooting efforts may occur on your end if something does not go wrong, for example, due to misconfiguration. Let's see one next question. One moment, just need to scroll up again. So one question was, does the Rancor solution allow to list all shared files, sites, etc. in SharePoint Online and OneDrive with external users? And the bonus question also with the user who initiated the sharing. So maybe Björn, you can, I don't know if in your demo data you actually have data there for external shared files, but the answer is yes. Rancor Governance does scan also shared files, both for OneDrive and SharePoint Online. If you scroll down, so you see here 6 shared files in SharePoint, where you then see those files, and you can also add who has created and edited that file. We currently do not retrieve the information who has shared the files. As soon as that information is available through the APIs, we would add that. And the same goes for OneDrive. And OneDrive, well, you usually know who shared it because it's the OneDrive owner, which is part of that data. So the answer there is yes. You know that in that site specifically, files have been shared. So you can build, for example, a check that gives you all sites that have SharePoint files that are shared in it, and then you get also the information for the sites. Is it possible to export the results of the violations of checks to a CSV file for further analysis in Excel? At the moment, no, but this is a feature that is currently finalized and will be rolled out soon, that any data grid that you see in the entire product allows you to export the data to an Excel file. Let me move on to the next question. So that's a common question that we get. Does running all these checks have any performance impact to the tenant? For example, throttling by Microsoft if API calls are exceeded. So for that, you need to understand how throttling works. So Microsoft uses throttling exactly for that reason, to not affect your tenant if one solution, your custom built solution or a product like ours are overusing the APIs. So that's the purpose of throttling, is to keep the tenant accessible and usable by your end users. In a while back, Microsoft didn't really fully implement that throttling, so it could indeed happen that an application could bring down the entire tenant. That's no longer the case, and how are we doing that? We follow the guidelines by Microsoft to avoid being throttled. So if throttling is happening, it would throttle our client, our scanning client that is retrieving the data, and we would then automatically wait until the time that Microsoft 365 response we are throttled has passed before we would attempt to resume the scanning process. So in worst case, it would slow down the scanning process of getting data from your Microsoft 365 tenant to Rancor Governance, but it would not have impact on the tenant itself or any other application that is using the APIs. We have 2 articles around that in our knowledge base, so we will add that later on to when we share the recording of this meeting, or you can just go to support.rancor.com and search for throttling, and then you will find the articles linked together about how scanning works and how we avoid throttling. All right, let me see, there's another question. The challenge we have is that if we open up Teams to guest users, all Teams are by default open, unless we jump through lots of hoops with sensitivity labels and scripts. Have you found a better way to do this? No, unfortunately, the settings are global there in the Teams Administration Center. I think there might be options through PowerShell to adjust that. What you can do, of course, with a tool like Rancor Governance, you could at least monitor it and, for example, automatically apply specific for example, a specific name to a team if it has external users in it, so that you immediately see, okay, somebody has shared this team with external users. Or you could, of course, also alert somebody to review the users and say, okay, this team cannot be externally shared. But for configuration on the Microsoft 365 side, I currently do not know of a different solution. Next question. I think we had that one already. Okay, one more from Joe. Is it possible to have an authorization step in the automation? For example, if a condition is triggered by a user, the automated resolution does not take effect until the team or site owner has granted authorization. So at the moment, we just rolled out automations a month ago. At the moment, such an action to get approval or feedback, that's basically what you're asking for, is not yet live. We will add a new action that purpose is exactly that you can involve in your automation process also your end users, ask them for permission, for approval to do a specific task, if they even gather data, gather some kind of feedback, and then either continue that automation or stop it or continue in another way. So that is obviously a common use case, so and will be added as an additional action to our automations tooling. One more thing. So a question is, how long is report data kept? Year or shorter? The data is kept indefinitely at the moment, so all the entire information that is gathered from the point in time when you subscribe to Rancor Governance, all the data will, all the historic data will be kept. That means also, for example, flow run history, which on the Microsoft end is automatically purged after 28 days. In Rancor Governance, you get the entire flow run history. Similar for audit logs and everything is stored indefinitely there. Storage in general is cheap, so that is why we don't see an issue with that. And all that data is primarily metadata. So we are not, there's no really big data that is stored in Rancor Governance, but only the metadata around your tenant and all the information that is gathered. And then another question, I see in the demo that an administrator can download a content file. Isn't that security trimmed? I'm not entirely sure what you mean with a content file. So if you mean like, Björn, can you go back maybe to SharePoint files or a moment? Yeah, this is, for example, a file. So here, download it, probably you mean download as PDF. So you're not, that is maybe misleading here. That button download as PDF is not downloading the file branding elements.pptx. It's generating a PDF file of all the information that you currently have on this specific page. So the properties, if you go to the properties tab, so the properties of that file, when it was created, the ID and so on, the related objects, and if there are checks configured for files, also which checks are violated. So it generates your file. Maybe you can just click the download as PDF button here, and then we can show. So there is no access to that file unless that person has indeed already access to that file. So if you press the three dots button, then you could open that file in SharePoint, but if you do not have access, then you wouldn't see it. So this is what the PDF is. It is a generated file of that information that you've seen in the product. All right, let me see if I missed something. I think that's about it. So if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in. And of course, always feel free, as Björn already said, to just give it a try. When you go to start a trial, you do not actually have to connect your tenants. So the demo data that you just saw, that Björn showed you, is what you get right away, and you can play around with the entire product with the demo data. You can use your Microsoft 365 account for logging in, but you can also use email and password if you do not want to provide us any information whatsoever. So no need for the trial to connect a tenant. You can, of course, if you want to see your the whole thing with your own data, but a trial does indeed allow you to experience the entire product with the demo data that we can provide. And if you prefer more one-to-one demo or walkthrough for yourself or your team, then feel free to schedule a call with us. We're happy to show you around in more detail to meet your specific use cases that you have. All right, that's it. With that said, back to Björn.
Yeah, I think that's it for me then as well. Thanks so much for joining today. Thanks so much for all the questions that you had. And then make sure to join us in our next webinar. I think next webinar we have is next month, and it will be a webinar with a partner of us and their end customers, in which the partner actually will do the webinar and talk about how they use Rancor Governance for the end customer, and the end customer will talk about their experience. So that might be helpful for you guys as well. With that said, thanks so much for the time, and then talk to you soon enough. Bye-bye.